just pause here so you can see the objectives. Okay, so let's move on and just make sure I'm showing the right screen. Are you seeing the slides? Betsy, are you seeing my slides? Vanessa, thank you. Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, so tonight we're going to introduce a little kind of activity. I know sometimes it's, especially after a long day, it's hard to kind of, want to speak up and participate. And what's really important to me about this professional learning community that we are creating together is that we have every voice heard in this community, because you all have so much to say and so much knowledge to share. And so I want to make it an equitable experience for everyone. So I have this little thing. You may disagree with me about this, but we're going to try it out. So I have this little pouch, and in my pouch, I have everybody's names. We're not going to use this all the time, but sometimes we're just going to pull out a name and, have a question that you might answer. And what I want to say about this is that it's okay if you don't know the answer. It's okay if you guess. It's okay if you just want to try to, say something that you might, may not feel super confident about, because this is the way that we learn, right? We learn from maybe not knowing what the answers are and hearing from others. So, so that's okay. Remember, as we said in our group agreements, this is a safe space for us to be able to engage in, right? So for this next little part, we'll be bringing this out of my little yellow pouch. But I wanted to just start off with talking about some key differences between executive function and self-regulation. You might have even seen this yourself in some of the readings. A lot of the times these two terms get lumped together, and there isn't always a clear definition of what each of them means. And so I wanted to be able to kind of pull these two apart so you can see really what the differences are. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that I've created a new folder in your student resources folder that has all the slides from all of the different weeks. So you can always go back if you want to look at those slides. So that'll be in your student resources folder. So executive function is really more cognitive in nature. So it's really about like paying attention, focusing, planning and problem solving, ability to perform tasks in a sequence, right? You don't tie your shoe before you put your shoe on your foot, right? You put your shoe on your foot, then you tie it. So being able to perform tasks like that. And it's about like mental organization and flexibility. So it's more cognitive. And so does that make sense? Oh, good. So then self-regulation is a little bit more about the social emotional aspect of development. Self-regulation is more about how we manage our own behavior. So it's about self-control. If I have a chocolate bar in front of me, can I eat one piece or do I eat the whole thing, right? It's about our management of how we manage our thoughts and feelings and how we make choices. So, right, so that goes back to like self-control. Am I going to make a healthy choice right now and just eat maybe a bite for a treat, or am I going to eat the whole thing? It's how we engage and interact with others. So that social piece of how we interact with other people. It's self-monitoring and self-evaluation. So goodness, I know that it's probably not a healthy choice if I eat the whole chocolate bar. So I will maybe just eat one piece. And so that's about self-talk too. Like, okay, what are the messages that you're telling yourself? Like, okay, maybe just this one time it's okay to eat the whole thing for a treat. So the difference there is just that it's more about social emotional development. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, so this is just a little bit of a review because you did, hopefully, you did spend some time reading more about self-development, or I'm sorry, executive function and self-regulation. So I would like for us to each have a turn and share something that you learned from this last week from the readings and assignments list that you engaged with. Okay, so I'll give you just a moment to kind of think about that. And then we're going to pull out our little name, our name pouch here. So we'll all have a turn. Okay, so let's see who's first. All right. First name is Getsy. Getsy, what's something you learned this last week?
Did that be what we learned, or can it be like our opinion on one of them?
Sure. Yeah. Just, yeah. Any kind of reflection about the readings.
So I was about the milestones, like the developmental milestones and all that. I agree with like how people go about it and whatnot. I just feel like sometimes it's not, it is accurate. I feel like a lot of the stuff is accurate, but then I feel like I've said this before to like some people, when children are born early, like premature, we don't see where they are developmentally, like ideally, because technically, yeah, they look like a 4-month-old baby, but they were born early, so they're not really a 4-month-old baby. And so when we're comparing them to like a lot of the milestones and stuff, obviously, I feel like not obviously, but like they are gonna be a little bit more delayed. And so I feel like sometimes some stuff like that isn't very accurate depending on each child's circumstance. So I don't know. Like I said, I agree with all of it, but then you have those few kids that it just isn't where they are.
Absolutely. It's a great point that the milestones are helpful in a sense of helping us know where children should be generally, but there are a lot of variables that go into that if child is not developing typically for some reason. And children all develop differently. That's why they don't all walk at 12 months and 3 days, right? Some of them walk at 6 or 8 months, and some of them walk at 15 months. And so it's a generalization of how children develop. So just keeping that in mind is a really good point. All right. Our next contestant is Sadie. Sadie, what's something that came up for you this last week?
So something that I put a lot of thought into, I guess, was the article about music and infants and toddlers. I didn't really put that much thought into like how much music can change kids' brains and like help form them. But when I was reading the article, I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. It can help build all these things in their brains, such as like the cognitive skills and social emotional, and how it's not just basically like entertaining them, it's also setting them up for further education and growth.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Sadie. Yes, there's a ton of research about how important music is to young children's development. I mean, to the human brain in general, but there's been a lot of research that's been done about how music can really help support brain development. So that's something you're interested in as an educator. You might pursue that, learn more about that. Okay. All right, Melina, next. If you're safe, are you safe when you're driving?
Yeah. So for me, it was it was their choose your own reflection that talked about like bilingual development on children.
Mhm.
Because I've had like a lot of families that are like they speak both languages at home, and they're like, no, I just want to speak Spanish to him because I'm gonna confuse him, or he's gonna have like a speech delay, or and I've read a lot of these articles, and I was like, no, like nothing's gonna happen. Like their brains are so like magical that they can take as many languages as you um show them. But I think that for the families that I work with, um like I feel that I still have to share a little bit more of information and all that so they can like trust the process, because I feel that sometimes like they limit their child's like abilities. So I think that it's really nice to read that the brain is capable of doing um both languages or more.
Yeah, yeah, it's actually not true, and it's a common belief that being a dual language learner actually is slows down development. It actually has been proven to be the opposite. So
Mhm.
dual language learners, or maybe more than dual than two languages, it actually their brains actually function at a higher level than monolingual one language children, because they are doing so much cognitive activity. They're code switching, right? So they're switching from languages, from one language to the other, oftentimes. And there's a ton. We could like spend the whole semester just talking about that. But a lot of families are concerned about that it is a developmental delay if children speak more than one language. But actually the opposite is true. So very interesting there. Okay, thanks, Melina. And our next contestant is Cheyenne.
Hi, I have to like kind of go off of what she said too, because I feel like that's like pretty relevant to like my personal classroom also right now. Because in my classroom we don't have a Spanish speaking teacher. I know very little, so I can communicate with our fully Spanish speaking kids like in little things like don't stand on the table, wash your hands and stuff like that. But they definitely need more than that. Because I know that like with my own children, like their dad speaks Spanish, but I'm not entirely like sure of why he hasn't, kind of passed that down. And I know that some people do say that like if you send them to like one of those bilingual schools that they do teach Spanish with it, that there can be a speech delay or they'll have like academic problems. And I think like sure that could happen with any kids, doesn't matter if they're bilingual or not. Some kids can just have learning issues or speech delays. It doesn't necessarily have to tie to like being bilingual. And I think it's like so important, I can't remember if that article said it or if I'm remembering from just something that I've read before, but like teaching kids like a different language before a certain age is like so like crucial, because it's easier for them to learn, and it's just from going to one language to another. And I think that that's something that some parents or like teachers or faculty teams just kind of like don't realize that it's pretty imperative for one to not give a child the benefit of knowing a second language, especially if you're in like a community that has two languages. And I know that when kiddos do know two languages, sometimes they prefer one or the other. Like one of my kiddos, he definitely knows full English, but he definitely communicates his words, his emotions, and how he feels about things way better if he has a Spanish speaking teacher. So I think that that's like really important to me, and I think should be really like talked about more within like certain communities and stuff, and certain like how do you say, like the attendance, like if you have a lot of Spanish speaking kids or any kind of bilingual children, there should be some type of accommodation for them.
Great, thanks, Cheyenne. Yes, great points. And we are working more and more and more with children who are dual language learners, right? So they speak at least 2 languages, sometimes more. And so how can we really support them and their families? And so this seems to be a topic, super important, of course, but seems to be a topic that's standing out for many of you. So I will look for more resources that we can add to our resource list, our choose your own adventure list, so you can learn more about it if that's something that's of interest for you. Awesome. Okay, Vanessa. You're on mute, Vanessa. I can't see your whole face. I don't know if you're talking.
Sorry, my computer
Okay.
got messed up. So one thing I thought that was really interesting in one of the readings is, so I've always been told that having a routine schedule is important, but now reading into it and seeing how much that affects the brain and it helps them as well it's just really interesting, because like I said, I've always been told but didn't really know the reason for it or anything like that. So just hearing how the brain works and how that it just has a big part of their little brains and everything like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for sharing that, Vanessa. So, routines are really important for young children for a lot of reasons, right? We know that they need that predictability. It helps them to feel safe and secure, right? Young children need those safe and secure, responsive relationships with caregivers. Part of that is including things like routines, so that they really are aware and understand what happens in the sequence of their day. And that really goes back to this idea of executive function and mental organization, right?
Mhm.
And there's been other research that has been done where they've looked at classrooms that don't have routines and don't have a lot of organization, which they call chaotic environments. So it's just like anything goes. You can eat lunch whenever, you can do whatever, whenever. And they've actually measured the stress levels of both children and teachers in those kind of environments. And what they see is stress levels go up and up and up. So
Yeah.
when you have predictability and routine, and children and teachers have an organized way of thinking about and moving through their day, it helps with all kinds of things: executive function and self-regulation, composure, all kinds of things. So it's super important stuff. Yes. Thanks, Vanessa, for that great.
Mhm.
Adriana.
Hi, yes, one of the videos that I saw was that one, the Spanish, the duolingual or bilingual kids too. I'm always fascinated about that. And also they were mentioning how the brain works, and how this executive function, it's on our left side, and the other, like, social and emotional function, it's on the right side. And it's, for me, it was just so amazing that when they are bilingual, or when they know more than one language, those hemispheres, that's how you say it.
Yeah.
Yes, they connect more, they communicate to each other more. And I was just thinking about the children, that when we're doing assessments, I can totally see that when they are like more
when they are bilingual or exposed to more than one language, they are more calm, and they try to pay more attention to stuff, and they focus better. It's just like amazing how these things works, and now that I'm doing it and then I'm looking at them, it's just like I can see that that's true. And another thing that really like was about it prevents some mental illnesses when they are like adults, like for example Alzheimer, when we are like bilingual. And it's so hard because I was listening to this video and I totally relate how it's different for kids, for like younger children, and like middle school kids and adults. They put in this example, and for adults it's more like it's harder because the plasticity part of the versus the when they are young. And it's hard for me, like for example, it's hard for me to process everything because I'm always translating in my mind. Always, I'm just trying to like remember these words, and I can see that on our parents too. They wanted to say a lot, but it's just like they are processing different than when they are little. So yeah, it's, I think Cheyenne was the one who was talking about the youngest the kids are, it's easier for them to learn another language.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm just always fascinated about that.
It's a wonderful observation that you make with working with the children that you're working with when assessments and observing that kind of brain functioning happening right then and there. And you mentioned about brain plasticity, and we did talk about that I think a couple of weeks ago, but that is really important to remember, especially about young children, is that their brain plasticity is so high right now, I guess that's the right word, because they are, remember, they're creating all those neurons, all those neural connections, thousands and millions of neural connections every single second. And as they start to get older, they remember those neurons begin to prune themselves, right? It's called pruning, where they get kind of rid of the neural connections they don't need any longer. So the more that and it's not about like, we have to like teach everything we could possibly teach in the first three years of life. That's not what this is about at all. But how we are supporting children's development, right? So through the relationships, the caring, responsive relationships that we have with children, the serve and return interactions that we're having with children, doing things like creating routines and predictability for young children, that all supports their brain development and those neural connections. So it's not about making sure that they know like everything from a dictionary by the time they're 3 years old, but how we really set them up for supporting their development as young children. So great. Well, thank you. I really enjoyed hearing all of those wonderful reflections. Appreciate you sharing. So we are going to talk a little bit more about executive function before we move into a little bit more about self-regulation. And so we are going to watch another little video. It's about 4 minutes long, I think. And this is a researcher who's going to be talking about executive function and how we can support it as educators.
I'm Adele Diamond. I'm the Canada Research Chair Professor of Developmental Cognitive Neuroscience at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. There are many things parents can do to help their children develop executive functions. One is to provide opportunities where executive functions are needed and challenged and need to be practiced. So, for example, storytelling is a great example of how the child really needs to pay attention without the benefits of pictures on the page or puppets or video, and has to use working memory to hold in mind everything you've been saying. Remember the characters' identities, what happened earlier in the story, to relate that to what's happening now. So, as you tell stories, you're helping your child develop executive functions. Another way is to provide aids so that your child can practice executive functions before your child could do it on his or her own without those aids. So, for example, sometimes pictures or signs can help a child remember what he or she is supposed to do when they wouldn't be able to remember otherwise. The best way to develop executive functions is to challenge them and train them and practice them, but also to indirectly support them by enhancing things that help them, like joy or social support, and minimizing things that impair them, like stress or sadness. So think about what activities require executive functions and challenge them, and provide emotional support, joy, social support, belonging, and you have to use your body. Well, you come up with traditional activities that we've always done. Music, dance, play, sports, things that, people have done since society's been in existence. Those things all help executive functions. When should certain executive functions be at manifest? That's really hard because there's so much individual variation. And they're developing during the time you're in school. Now, before you get to school, everybody's comfortable with babies starting to walk at different ages, starting to talk at different ages. We have no problem with that. And we know that the late talker is probably going to be just as good at language at age 2 or 3 as the early talker. But for some reason, we don't really appreciate that when it comes to executive functions or reading or math. And we worry so much when a child isn't ready to do it early. We think, oh no, it forebodes horribly for their school career and their life. Instead of giving children the time and space they need to develop at their own rate, because it really doesn't matter if you get it 6 months earlier or 6 months later. Different activities directly affect executive functions, indirectly affect them, or do both. So reducing stress indirectly helps executive function by taking away something that impairs it. Something like mindfulness both helps you develop attention regulation and executive functions to some extent, and also helps reduce things like stress, which indirectly help executive function. Most every activity has both aspects. So you think about sports, or you think about playing in the orchestra. You need to use executive functions to remember complex sequences, to be able to concentrate and pay attention, but you're also indirectly supporting executive functions by giving kids joy, helping them feel socially supported as if they belong to a group. So it's doing both.
Okay. So we're a little short on time, so I think we had an activity we were going to do here, but I think we're going to skip that. And we'll talk more about executive function throughout the rest of our time together, because really everything, as I was saying before, is related back to brain development. And executive function, everything that you're doing as an educator supporting young children and or families is in support of this type of development. So, we'll talk more about that. So probably just not making a lot of sense, but I'm just trying to say we'll talk more about this throughout the rest of our time together over the next few weeks. But I do want to move into now a little bit more about self-regulation. And just as we just as we move into this topic, kind of just want to share again as a quick review what self-regulation is. So it's again about how we regulate ourselves, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behavior. So, you know, when we experience an intense situation that might make us excited or perhaps scared or embarrassed, you know, how do we manage the choices we make about our behavior in those moments? How do we react or respond? That's part of self-regulation. It helps us, self-regulation helps us to calm down after stressful or upsetting situations. It also helps us with self-control. So it helps us control our impulses and our behavior and how we do react or respond to things. So, so that's just, again, a little review. We looked at this last week. And when we are talking about the brain, they want to share this model again, because remember, we have the top functions of the brain and the bottom functions of the brain. And we're going to look at a couple of different models of the brain tonight. So this is one. And so remember, our executive function, self-regulation comes up here at this prefrontal cortex, while our hippocampus, which is the blue part, supports our learning and memory. And then our amygdala, such a fun word to say, supports our emotional regulation. And so I'm going to show another video. I have a lot of videos tonight, but this is something that we can do. You can follow along because this is going to show you a way you can kind of think about the brain, the model of the brain, by using your hand. Okay, so and he's gonna walk us through that. And I think this is helpful because, you know, we look at all these pictures of brains and we're like, yeah, that's that part and this is that part, but how do they all work together? And how does one part, when one part does something, how does it affect the other parts? And so this hand model that he's going to show us, and again, follow along if you want, is kind of helpful just to see how all the parts of the brain function together.
Rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. they need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us.
Okay, so we're going to stop there. I'm curious, thanks for your comment, Adriana. Does anybody else find that helpful to sort of use the hand model to understand how the brain functions together? So when we're talking about flipping our lids, one of the things that we're talking about executive function and self-regulation and some of the ways that those show up, some of the different what it looks like, what these things look like. But what we're going to dive into now is a little bit about why. So why does self-regulation control our emotions? Why does executive function control our mental flexibility? And a lot of it has to do with what we call brain states. And I think that, well, I don't think, I know that brain states, what we're going to be talking about next, is an evidence-based curriculum called Conscious Discipline, which is a social emotional curriculum for children. We use Conscious Discipline at Clayton, and I think that you use it at Flow Crit. Can anybody from Flow Crit tell me if that's true? I see a sort of a top of a head nod from Vanessa. Yeah, okay. So this might sound or look familiar to you as we're talking a little bit about brain states. But what we're going to do is kind of look at each brain state and what happens in each of those states. And then to finish up our evening tonight, we're going to be watching some videos of children in various brain states so that you can see the differences. And we'll help you identify those different brain states when you're working with children, or if you work with families, how you can help support families in learning about brain states also. Okay, so there are 3 brain states, the executive state, the emotional state, and the survival state. So we are going to look at each one of these a little more closely. So survival, and I just want to go back to show you where survival is. Survival lives in your brain stem. This is like very basic. Am I going to live or die in this moment right now? So it is, are you going to survive? So it's in your brain stem. And what it looks like is that this response that you've probably heard about is called fight, flight, or freeze. So in this moment where you're in the survival state, what is, it's kind of an automatic response to the situation. You are not able to think about it. You are not able to problem solve. You're not able to think about the situation logically. You are just, your body, your brain and your body are automatically deciding if you are going into fight, flight, or freeze. When we're talking about young children, the child is the only person who can decide if they are in survival mode. And what I mean by that is that when you as an adult may see that this child is safe, this child is not being hurt right now, they are in a safe space, they are cared for, they are loved. But in that moment when the child is in survival state, only they can make that determination because they're the ones who are feeling that reaction, that fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, so even if you think the child is safe, the child is not feeling safe. And that's what this state is about. Am I safe? Okay, so in this state, children cannot learn or problem solve or listen to reason. Their brains cannot process that information. They're only, all of their energy is going towards survival. When you see this state, verbal communication and eye contact are minimal or non-existent. And some of the typical behaviors you might see in this state are hitting, kicking, biting, running away, physical fits, hiding, shutting down, and giving up. Okay. So this is just a very quick overview of what survival state looks like. Do you have any questions about this state or thoughts? Okay, so our next state is the emotional state. This state is asking the question, am I safe and am I loved? So what this state looks like is intense reactions, intense emotional reactions to a situation. So the child is not in survival state, so they are able to, there is a level of thinking, of cognitive processing that can happen, but it's very, very limited. So it's very difficult for children to think clearly, or to understand the feelings of others in that moment. And think about yourself. Okay, so just take a moment to think about when you've had like a really intensive emotional reaction to a situation. Maybe you just got fuming mad about something, or you were terrified, or something happened and it made you very scared. And I'm not trying to, create a trigger for you. I just want you to just kind of think about like look at it from the outside in. When you had that experience, were you able to think clearly? Were you able to calmly have a discussion with maybe the other person that was involved? I'd love to hear from a couple of you about how you were feeling in that moment when you were having that intense emotional response.
I think I feel like I need to protect myself, right? It's just like, yeah.
Yeah. So you're focused on you. You're focused on yourself, right? So you're maybe not thinking about the other person as much in that moment. You're thinking about how am I going to protect myself in this moment? It's a really great observation. Who else? You can share in the chat too if you want. Some other feelings that you experience when you're experiencing an intense emotional situation. Maybe thoughts or feelings. And start pulling out little names. Here they come in the chat. Okay. So yeah, so you might experience some intense emotions like anger, sadness, frustration, feeling short-tempered. That's a great point, Getsy. Like, are you able to calmly respond in that moment? Or do you have a short fuse and it's like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna react right now, right? Okay, so thank you for sharing. Yeah, so think about young children and when you see them having an intense emotional reaction to a situation, these are the same things that children are feeling in that moment. It's hard to calm down. It's hard to focus. It's hard to think clearly, right? When I'm feeling that way, I might say something that I might regret later. So think about that when you're observing children in that state. So some of the behaviors that you might see are yelling. And when I say yelling, and I kind of have that highlighted in red there, this is an important indicator of being in the emotional state, because when children are yelling at you, no, I hate you, or I want that toy, or whatever they're yelling, right? They are communicating with you. So remember, in the survival state, children cannot communicate. All of their energy is going to survival. So they cannot communicate with you in that state. So if a child is yelling, it actually is kind of like a good sign that they're in the emotional state and not in survival state. Does that make sense? And sometimes you have to like really watch and observe that to see what the behavior is that's happening. Some other behaviors might be ignoring, blaming, name calling, defiance, those kinds of things. And I'm sure you, as either a teacher or an aunt or a parent, you probably have experienced these with young children, right? This emotional state. Any questions about this one before we move on? Okay, so the third state is called the executive state, and it's very tied to our executive function and self-regulation, right? So this is when learning can happen. A child feels physically and emotionally safe. When they're in the emotional state, they do not feel emotionally safe. They might not feel physically safe. When they're in the executive state, they feel both safety, physical and emotional safety. Again, this is where learning can happen, right? We in the emotional state, remember the hand model, we have flipped our lids. And so the brain is not functioning together in that moment very well. So when we get back to the executive state, which is where our lids are nice and tight, this is when we can do things like problem solving, listening to reason, making choices that might be better choices than others, managing our behavior well, those kinds of things. And so this is where our emotions are well managed, even in moments that might become frustrating. So if you work with a child who's trying to learn a new skill and they're getting frustrated, but they're persevering, they keep trying, they're not giving up. Even if they're a little bit frustrated, that's that kind of good stress that we talked about, I think, in our first or second session. That good stress helps our brains to like, okay, we've got to figure this out. How do we do this? How do we do this right now? So that's when you're in the executive state. Okay. So does that make sense? And do you have any questions about that? All right. So now you are going to be the researchers again. Remember, as early childhood professionals, you are part of what you do is research. You observe, you assess, you learn about the children and families that you work with. Those are all research activities. So put your researcher hat on for this next bit, because we're going to look at a few different videos of children in various brain states. And when we pause the video, we are going to name the state that you think that child is in. And I'm going to use my little name drawing for this. And again, remember, it's okay if you don't get it right, because we're all learning. And sometimes it's not always easy to tell either. So that's why we want to look at these together and think about them together. So that's how we'll be able to learn more about these different states, brain states. Okay, so let me get my little video queued up here. Oh, and what did I do here? Well, I skipped a video, but that's okay. I think this is more important, so I'll add that to our readings list for this week. Okay, so let's start with some friends that we met last week. We're just going to again watch a few moments of this video, and then I'll pause it, and I'll ask one of you what you think, which state it is.
Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Oh, not this one. This is the grand finale of it. Okay, the last? Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah.
Okay, so Melina, what state do you think that little guy is in?
Well, it has some emotional because he's making the connection with his dad.
That is a good guess, but when we are looking at the emotional state, this is when you're looking at it, you're observing a child who is experiencing an intense emotional reaction to a situation. Bless you.
Oh, thank you.
So he, yes, might be making an emotional connection to his dad, but is he experiencing an intense emotional reaction in this moment? Or
No.
would you say he's in a situation where he's learning?
Yeah, more.
Yes. So he's in the executive state, right? Because he's having this conversation with his dad. He's using his language, his verbal ability, he's pointing, he's calm, right? When you're in an emotional state, you're not calm. So
Yeah.
that's a good key to remember when you're in the emotional state.
Okay.
Great guess. Good job, Melina. Okay. So let's watch another one.
My broom. Oh no, she's so sad. It's not funny. There's a temper tantrum by any chance? Yeah.
Depends on what her body language is telling you.
All right. I'm gonna stop taking the cat now.
Okay. So it might be helpful if I go back to the slides here, we can just look at this one. And let's see here.
Now I know the answer.
And sometimes it's you have to see a few before you can tell, right? Sadie, what would you say that state is that little girl is in right now?
I kind of want to say that she's in survival because of the way that she's like screaming and then she's like backing up while she's crying. But
Okay.
I don't know if you would consider like a normal child tantrum to be survival either.
It's a great question. What do you all think?
I think so.
You think so? Which, Cheyenne, that she's in survival?
Yeah, that she's in survival. She's in a survival state, and I think like regular tantrums, as we call them, are at least some part of survival state because kids don't know how to regulate their emotions. So once, like I think of it, like how the executive state, the emotional state, and the survival state are all in different colors. I picture it like a thermometer.
Mhm.
And once kids get to that red at the top or bottom of the thermometer, then they're so overwhelmed that basically they're lacking oxygen to their brain. So like critical thinking and other things don't operate anymore, and they can go like into like a state of panic, or like needing to be held, or like being fearful. Yeah.
Yeah, great points. So yeah, I would also agree that this little girl is probably in survival state at that point. She was, and you know, it's like you go in and out of these states, right? So it's not like you are just all of a sudden in survival state unless, you know, something intense has happened to you, right? A bear comes out of the woods, you're like, oh, I'm in survival state right now, right? But she probably was in an emotional state before we saw the video, before we saw her on the video, right? So then, you know, if you look at her body language, she's screaming, crying, so she's not communicating, right? She's a young toddler, but we don't see eye contact, right? And making with her mom, I'm assuming that's her mom with the camera. She's, Sadie pointed out, she's like pushing herself away. So that could be like, you know, hiding or surrendering. And she's not in physical control really of her body at that point, right? She throws herself down on the floor. She's kind of squirming around. So, you know, sometimes it's tricky to tell, but because of the intensity of her response right then, I would also agree that she's in survival. Great job. Okay, let's watch the next one. And remember to think about like what you're observing as far as their body language, verbal ability in the moment, those kinds of things.
Look at Peter's reading mine. Is yours? Uh-oh, I think it's overflowing. That's okay. Oh, Morado, do you want my plate? ¿Quieres estar aquí? There you go. Okay. I want to get a chair. Okay. Here. I want to get a chair. No, I'm not going to put it down. There we go. Okay, scoot over to one side, okay? So we've got Peter, do you need a chair or are you doing okay?
Okay, so let's go back to our brain states. And Adriana, what would you say that state would be?
Executive state.
And can you tell us a little bit about why you would say that?
Because they were playing and they were sharing and they were helping each other. So yeah, they were ready to learn.
Ready to learn. At what could you tell about their emotional state in that moment? Were they calm? Were they excited? What kind of emotions were they expressing?
Yeah, calm, involved. They were connected. That's what I saw.
Yeah. So they were calm, they were contently playing, they were working together, they were playing with the sensory table. Does anybody else have a different idea about that or a question? Do you agree, not agree? They were in the executive state.
I agree that they were in executive state because they were communicating well, and the little girl like asked if she could have a chair to an adult. So I think that's important too when
good communication is happening, right?
Yeah.
So in emotional and survival state, communication is not happening, right?
Yeah.
Not happening well. Good. Exactly. Okay. Awesome. So let's look at the next one. And this one's a little hard to hear, so just have to kind of, you know, lean in a little bit to see, make sure you can hear. Again, look at verbal behavior, body language, those kind of things, emotional behavior.
Think. Angela, I'll help you 1 second, okay? Let me help Alex with this. What can we say? Oh, Josh, Alex wants to tell you something. Look, Josh, his fire truck is missing a guy. If you're not ready for Alex's turn, what can you say to Alex?
I'm not done yet.
And what else can you say?
I want one.
You can say, you can use it when I'm done.
You can use it when I'm done. And I want one now.
I know that you want one now, but right now Josh needs 2 for his play. But when he's done, he will give you one. I hear you. I hear that you want one now. We have to wait. Can I find you a different person? I hear you, Alex. Can we find another person? You don't want another person? We have to wait until Josh is finished. Right now, for his play, he needs 2. I know it's hard to wait, but you will get a turn. Josh knows. Remember his words? Remember Josh's words? He said he would give it when he was done. You gotta wait till he's finished.
Okay. So Vanessa, what state would you say this little guy is in? You're on mute. If you're talking, I can't see you.
Sorry. I would say emotional.
Okay. And why would you say that is the state he's in? What did you notice about his behavior?
He was just upset, and he just like when he wanted something, so he was just emotional.
Yeah, he was.
Found it.
He looked like he was either sad or frustrated. Maybe he was upset.
Yeah.
What was he doing? Was he communicating?
Yes.
How was he communicating?
Just by crying, just letting him know what he wanted, and just upset that he doesn't have the toy that he wants.
Yeah, so he was using words, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that is a great observation. So we can tell that he's in the emotional state because he's experiencing an emotional response to a situation, right? But he's still communicating with his teacher. He's saying, I want that guy or the little man or whatever the toy was. I want that now. I don't want to wait. He was looking at her. Did you notice that? He was making maybe not direct eye contact, but he was directing his attention to the teacher because he was telling her, right? So when you're in survival state, you're not making eye contact, you're not talking, you're not communicating in that way. You're communicating in other ways, but not in those ways. So that's a really good way to remember the emotional state, and remember that children in that state it's hard for them to think clearly. So he wasn't able to think about, okay, well, I'm going to get a turn in a minute, so I'll be okay for just a minute until I get my turn. It was hard for him to think clearly. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he wasn't problem solving. So the teacher was trying to help him. Oh, we can get another man for your car. If he doesn't want that, no, I don't want that one. You know, so you can kind of just see how this just happens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So great job. Okay. So let's do a couple more.
라고 있어, 엄마. 엄마, 좀 라고 있어. 라고 있어.
Let's watch it one more time.
라고 있어, 엄마. 엄마, 좀 라고 있어. 라고 있어.
Okay. So, Cheyenne, what state do you think this little girl is in?
I'm sorry, Kathleen. I was getting my baby because she started crying and I didn't see part of it.
Okay, no worries. Guessly.
I feel like that's survival just because they were hitting, like, not, I don't know, I couldn't tell if it was just like hitting or if they're trying to push them back, but I feel like it's survival.
Okay. What do others think? What else did you observe in that? It's a very short video, but what else did you observe? What else does she do?
For me, it's more like emotional.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I would go with emotional too. I don't know.
Say more. Say more about why you think that.
I feel like he was using body language as well. Like he was communicating, but with his body language.
Okay.
And they were like kind of doing eye contact. I believe I couldn't see the mom. We couldn't see the mom or the other person, but he was definitely looking at her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I agree with all of you. I think that one's tricky to tell because you're seeing some body language that shows you survival, right? Like the hitting, the withdrawing, like she was like this, right? And then she turned away from the person. But then we also saw some eye contact, right? And this, with emotional, it's like what it looks like is talking back, sass, kind of some verbal reactions. She wasn't talking, right? So we're really looking at body language. But she was maybe being a little bit defiant, I would say. That would be my opinion. She was just kind of being defiant to whoever was the adult right there. So we don't know. It could be maybe both. So I think that was a good one to show you that sometimes it's hard to tell, or they might be going in and out of different states.
Yeah.
So just something to be aware of. Yeah, go ahead, Adriana.
Yeah, I think it's in that case, it can be possible to like go to the executive state or go down to survival state. It's just like in this line that it could be positive thing or a not very positive learning experience or something.
Yeah, great point. I want to watch one more. I just noticed what our time is, and I'm like, oh my goodness, how did that happen? This one is a little bit longer, and you're going to see, I want you to see what you think you see here on this one. And I'm going to pause it a couple of times just for us to talk about it. We'll try to get this squeezed in right at the end here.
We don't have some more. Don't forget you left those things out. We gotta throw it in the trash can. I don't have any more peaches. Sit down.
Okay, so we'll just do anybody. Shout out what you think state he's in right there.
Executive state?
Executive state, right? So he's had a situation with his peaches falling on the ground, but he's problem solving, like, uh-oh, my peaches fell. Can I have some more? So that's problem solving, right? Okay.
These are dirty. I don't have any more peaches. Would you like some banana? Zachary, Brianna, and Ryan, go wash your hands. I'm sorry, Joshua, I didn't throw them on the floor. They're dirty. No, Josh, they're dirty. peaches. It's okay, Brittany. Joshua, would you like to get up and have a banana?
Okay, now what state is he in?
It's like emotional going into survival state.
Yeah, I'd say he's in an emotional state right now. He's, you know, he's having a physical reaction, right? But he's still communicating. He said, no, I don't want that, what you're offering me. No. So that's still communication. Okay, so we'll watch a little bit more here. And I might skip ahead a little bit.
Miss Leslie, since you're here, Josh and I will go in the other room. Huh?
Oh, they don't
You take
coincide.
mine.
Sarah,
I'll
take them to the shed. They don't, okay.
Joshua, you want to get up and have a banana, or do you want to go back to the classroom? Okay, we're going back to the classroom.
It's not great.
And I'm sorry that you didn't get a nap. Joshua, that really hurt.
Stop it!
Have a little bit. Okay. Then what state do you think he's in there at the end?
I don't know if that would be considered like survival because he starts throwing things, but he's not really, but I couldn't tell because it's not like she's directly like sitting with him, talking with him. She's just picking up the toys around him. So I don't know if it was like emotional borderline like survival or maybe just survival. I'm not entirely sure.
Any other thoughts real quick? No, we're out of time, but. So I would guess at the end there, he's probably in survival. He's showing some of those really intensive behaviors like throwing, hitting, right? He hits his teacher. And then at the end, you see him like retreat, go and withdraw into the little playhouse, right? So I think probably at the end there, he shifts into survival. So anyway, great job, everybody. Of course, we ran out of time and to talk a little bit more about this. So we'll maybe pick this back up next week because we will probably want to process this a little bit. And what do you do when you see children in these various states, which is what we're going to be kind of shifting into, transitioning into over our next few weeks. So thank you so much for staying a couple minutes late. Appreciate all of your engagement and participation as always. You're doing a great job with your reflections, and thank you for turning in your personal philosophy of education. If I talk to you